You have no idea what you've created inside yourself. It is not a monster. It is not a hero. It is something far more dangerous, something the world cannot categorize, cannot predict, cannot control. It is the version of you that no longer needs anyone. And in a society addicted to approval, built on dependency, that makes you a threat. You spent too long in solitude, and now the rest cannot read you. They confuse your silence for emptiness. But silence is not absence. It is a blade. While others suffocate under the desperate need to be seen, validated, approved, you move like a shadow. You watch without being noticed. You gather everything, reveal nothing. They drain themselves screaming for attention. You build in stillness. They believe the loudest voice wins. You discover the opposite truth, the one who listens without reacting, who speaks only when it is time to strike, controls the entire game. You have seen how people betray themselves in nervous laughter, in contradictions, in the silences between their words. They think truth is in what they say. You know it's in what they avoid saying, so you wait. While they rush to impress, you observe. While they try to explain, you dissect. And when their guard drops, when they finally show their hand, you act, quietly, without theatrics, without warning. The power you hold was forged in something most would never dare to face, the crucible of solitude. To them, loneliness is punishment. To you, it was war. Nights of fear, hunger, and self-betrayal. But you endured. You breathed through the fire and emerged colder, sharper, lethal in ways they will never anticipate. In silence, you studied. You tracked patterns, triggers, fragile egos. You stopped believing people's words and began dissecting their behavior. You learned that charisma is not character, and appearances are camouflage. You don't guess anymore. You know. Because in the solitude they fear, you built a mind that cannot be deceived. And you learned the most dangerous lesson of all, choice. You choose who enters your space. You no longer chase connection to fill a void. You do not keep company that costs you your clarity. You know now that a mediocre ally is more dangerous than an open enemy. That fake loyalty poisons deeper than open hate. So you stop convincing, stop dragging, stop begging people to walk beside you. Because nothing destroys a man slower than carrying someone who refuses to move. You paid the full price for this awareness. But you do not regret it, because there is no prison worse than being surrounded by the wrong people. Now you guard your energy like a fortress. The world celebrates exposure, demands performance, but you discovered the opposite, the devastating power of invisibility. They crave recognition, you crave results, they chase credit, you focus on impact. They want to be seen, you want to be remembered, not for noise, but for silence before the strike. You do not broadcast your steps, you do not announce your victories. You understand the deadliest move is the one no one saw coming. Loneliness was never your weakness. It was your training ground. The silence didn't mute you. It sharpened you. It didn't break you. It refined you. Like water cutting stone, solitude carved you into something the world cannot comprehend. Now every decision comes from clarity, the kind that belongs only to someone who answers to no one. You do not wait for permission. You do not explain your process. You own your time, your thoughts, your path. And now you carry the one thing they can never touch. Independence. Real independence. Not the cheap illusion in motivational slogans, but independence from approval, from validation, from noise. You carry the truth most will never learn. The one who needs nothing cannot be controlled, and there is nothing the world fears more than a human being who will not bend. They don't know how you became this. They only assume you were always this strong. They don't see the nights you spent battling your own demons. They don't see the wounds that taught you to bleed in silence. They don't know what it costs to become unreadable. Unreadable, that is your greatest advantage now. Because when people can't read you, they fear you. They cannot predict you. They don't know if you're resting, planning, or preparing to strike. That uncertainty is your shield. That silence, your camouflage. While they guess, you calculate. While they react, you anticipate. They invent stories to explain you. They call you cold, distant, mysterious. Because that is easier than admitting the truth. You stopped playing their game. You stopped reacting the way they wanted. You stopped giving away your energy, your attention, your plans. And they hate it because now they cannot use you. They cannot manipulate you. They don't fear you because you're cruel. They fear you because you're free. But freedom comes with a price. And this is where most break. The price is silence. The price is patience. The price is not being understood. The moment you break your silence to prove yourself, you hand them ammunition. You give them something to aim at. The moment you feel the need to show the world you are working, building, growing, you fall into their trap. That's when ego takes over. And ego is the enemy of strategy. You've learned to cage your ego, to feed it only enough to survive, never enough to lead. The ego wants recognition. It wants to be seen, praised, applauded. But you don't serve your ego anymore. You use it. You harness its fire, but you never let it steer your direction. This is where solitude transforms into strength, strategic patience, not idle waiting, not passive hoping, but building in silence, planning in shadows, acting only when the moment cannot be ignored. Because you've seen what happens to dreamers who talk too soon. Their visions die before they're even born. But the silent operator, the one who plans in the dark, emerges unstoppable, carrying something no one saw coming. Time is now your weapon. You don't rush. You don't chase. You don't need the world to know what you're doing, because what you're building doesn't require attention to survive. It only requires completion. And that's where the real shift begins. You rise above the chaos that consumes others. You don't waste yourself in petty arguments. You don't answer every insult. You don't spend energy defending your name to people unworthy of speaking it. Because you've learned, the one who fights every battle becomes a prisoner of battles. The one who ignores the irrelevant becomes untouchable. This is where solitude stops being a stage and becomes your base of operations. You are not isolated. You are positioned, like a sniper with a perfect view of the field. You reveal nothing until the shot is certain. You decide when to appear, when to retreat, when to let them believe they've won, only to reemerge when their guard is down and their strength depleted. This is not hiding. This is not cowardice. This is calculation. Because you've uncovered the deepest truth. Power is not in constant display. Power is in timing. If you are always visible, you become predictable. If you assert yourself endlessly, you drain yourself. But if you wait, if you conserve, if you strike only when necessary, your power multiplies. They burn themselves out trying to stay relevant every day. You move deliberately, invisibly, unhurried. And by the time they notice, the game is already over. It ended long ago, and only you knew it. In this silence, in this stillness, you finally see the world as it is. Most people don't act. They react. They don't decide. They impulse. They speak because silence makes them uncomfortable. They move because stillness terrifies them. They attack not from strategy, but from fear. You used to be one of them, but not anymore. Now you move at the pace of your plan. They move at the pace of their emotions. They rush. You pause. They panic. You observe. That difference is everything. It is the line between the manipulated and the master. And with that control comes something few ever achieve: detachment. The day you stopped needing immediate results was the day you became immune to manipulation. They can praise you or insult you. It changes nothing. They can tempt you with rewards or threaten you with loss. You don't move an inch, because detachment is not apathy. It is immunity. You still feel, but you are not ruled by feelings. You still respond, but never out of reaction. This is the threshold of a new kind of strength, a luxury most will never taste. Not the luxury of having more, but the luxury of needing less. Less validation, less distraction, less emotional noise. Inside, you begin clearing space like a battlefield stripped of debris. Step by step, the unnecessary is burned away until what remains is sharp, clean, precise. From that place, every action carries more force because it is unclouded by desperation, untouched by doubt. And now you see people clearly. Without the fog of need, motives reveal themselves. You know who flatters and who means it, who lies and who fears being caught, who approaches with hidden intentions, and who offers loyalty without a price. This ability isn't something you perform, it becomes instinct. And it is ruthless, because once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. This is where solitude becomes something deeper, a laboratory of the mind. You don't just sit in silence, you dissect yourself, not to wallow, but to refine. You study your flaws like a scientist studies the fault lines in a structure. You examine your fears, your failures, your reactions. You eliminate behaviors that weaken your mission. You strip illusions. You destroy the parts of yourself that once begged for applause, that once trembled at judgment. And in silence, you build. Quietly, methodically. No one sees it. No one praises it. But the structure forming within you is unshakable. Most will never understand this process because they need an audience to feel real. They need eyes on them to believe they exist. But you have evolved past that. You can sit in an empty room and feel whole. You need no witness to validate you. You exist, and that is enough. Because you know, the world does not reward noise. It rewards precision. And what you are building is so exact, so impossible to replicate, that when it finally emerges, it will need no introduction. It will be undeniable. And this is where danger begins. Not for you, but for them. Because you no longer seek to dominate, but your very existence threatens them. You remind them of something they fear, that they too could break free, if only they had the courage. But they don't. So your presence becomes a mirror, a reflection of their own untapped potential and of the fear they will never touch it. You, however, have already crossed the point of no return. You burn the bridge back to comfort, back to mediocrity, back to the herd. You no longer belong to their rules, their rituals, their hunger for likes and inclusion. You don't orbit their expectations. You are your own axis. They cannot lure you with flattery. They cannot trap you with guilt. You've left the emotional marketplace where people barter identity for approval. You do not negotiate your worth anymore. And that makes you rare, unclassifiable, untouchable. You cannot be boxed, defined, or controlled. And the solitude once mistaken for weakness has become your greatest strategic weapon. You control access to yourself. You control what people know. And when they cannot predict you, your value multiplies. Scarcity breeds significance. They try to be everywhere, every conversation, every trend. But their overexposure makes them disposable. You do the opposite. You are rarely seen. But when you appear, everything shifts, not because you demand it, but because your presence carries weight. You've become the embodiment of the law of scarcity, not just in action, but in being. And from that scarcity, you have cultivated something most will never manufacture: mystery. It is both your shield and your sword. It protects you from intrusion. It draws others without effort. It forces them to wonder, to speculate, to circle endlessly around questions they will never answer. They try to map your intentions, decode your strategy, predict your next move, but they fail, because you have made yourself unreadable by design, and mystery dies the moment you explain yourself. So you don't. You don't explain. You don't justify. You don't hand out pieces of your inner world to those who haven't earned the right. Even the closest must prove worthy of your transparency. Even loyalty must be tested. And when you choose to reveal something, it is never out of pressure, never out of fear. It is always deliberate. It is always control. Because every explanation is a key, and once given, that key may open doors you never intended to unlock. In this elevated state, solitude does not isolate you. It elevates you. You see the battlefield from above, like a strategist studying the terrain. Not because you fear the fight, but because you refuse to enter blind. From that vantage point, every move is chosen with surgical precision. Every word, every silence, every appearance. You no longer fight to win petty skirmishes. You play to win the war. And in war, the strongest position is not to be everywhere. It is to be unseen until it's too late. Not hidden in fear, but positioned in silence. Like a storm the sky forgets, until it breaks without warning. Like a predator the forest no longer senses, until it is already too late. This is how you've reshaped your power. not in volume, but in timing. And timing is everything. You don't move by the clock. Others obey it. You don't bow to urgency. Others panic under it. You have mastered the slow burn, the long game, the cold patience that breaks those who live only on momentum. And in that patience, your mind transforms. It stops being just a vessel for thought. It becomes an intelligent system. You no longer simply observe people. You map them. You no longer just anticipate reactions. You predict them with precision. You gather data silently, connecting threads they don't even see. While they chase moments, you stack advantages. While they scramble under pressure, you execute the plan you tested 100 times in solitude. And here is the brilliance. You no longer waste energy on unnecessary motion. You let time do the work for you. To most, time is pressure. To you, time is leverage. The impatient drown in it. You ride its current with calm calculation. Because you have learned. Time exposes the weak. It unmasks the fake. It collapses what is hollow and amplifies what is solid. And you, through solitude, have made yourself solid. From this foundation emerges a new power, the power to ignore. You don't fight every battle. You don't chase every glittering opportunity. You don't leap at every opening dressed as a promise. Because you've learned some battles are traps, emotional ambushes disguised as victories. And winning them costs more than losing ever would. So you let them pass, not from fear, but from clarity. You choose your wars. You choose your enemies. You choose your battles. And the ability to walk away without a scratch, that is dominance few recognize. The enemy who cannot tempt you, cannot control you. This selective detachment reshapes you at the core. You no longer treat power as an emotional reward. You treat it as a tool, precise, cold, functional. You don't seek to prove you are powerful. You simply use power when it serves the mission. You don't intoxicate yourself with attention. You don't let victory distract you from the next step. Every choice is measured against a single question. Does this serve the mission? And when power becomes a tool, not a trophy, the entire game changes. You are no longer ruled by luck, mood, or momentum. Everything hinges on preparation, and you prepared in the only place that forges the strongest. In the silence, in the shadows, where no one claps, no one watches, no one reassures you. That is where the unbreakable are made. And now you've become something the world doesn't know how to define. An enigma to some, a silent threat to others, a ghost that glides past the noise, leaving only outcomes behind. But here's the truth. You never set out to be the villain, the mystery, or the mastermind. You wanted clarity. You wanted precision. You wanted peace through discipline. And that desire made you unpredictable. In a world obsessed with being seen, you build in silence. In a world that mistakes noise for strength, you became fluent in the language of quiet execution. And that alone challenges everything around you, because you've become a reminder, not just of what people could be, but of what they fear to become. Why? Because it costs something, and you paid it. You burned the bridge to needing approval. You abandoned the need to be understood. You stopped offering pieces of yourself for comfort. And in that sacrifice, you gained what few ever hold, the power to control access to yourself. Not everyone sees you. Not everyone hears from you. Not everyone reaches you. And that scarcity becomes value. The law of scarcity doesn't just apply to things. It applies to people. You are not everywhere. You are not always available. And that is why you are never forgotten. While others flood the room with presence, you became the blind spot. The empty space no one watches, because they assume silence isn't dangerous. And that assumption is their downfall. Because when you move, you don't play by their rules. You change them, not with spectacle, not with noise, but with outcome. You no longer play for attention. You shape the board itself. This is the discipline of power, not to dominate with presence, but to alter the terrain until your presence becomes destiny. And that is what you are now, an invisible architect of fate. Others wait for the perfect moment. You create it. Others need to be remembered. You make yourself unforgettable by mastering the art of arrival. You don't need to be seen in advance. You appear only when there is no choice but to see you, And when that moment comes, they realize the plan was yours all along. That is the power of design in silence. But even this is not the final lesson, because silence alone is not mastery. Strategy alone is not mastery. The final level is to disappear from yourself, to stop negotiating with emotion, to stop debating with your past, to stop seeking permission from your fear. It is the point where you no longer react, not even internally. You become observer and executor in one. You understand that life is not a path you follow. It is a board you design, and you are both the player and the piece. At that point, mastery no longer needs to be shown. It is lived. You don't chase opportunity, you generate it. You don't wait for permission, you give it to yourself. You don't search for open doors, you build them, and you decide when they open. That is the final transformation, not into something admired, but into something that cannot be defined. And once you reach that place, you finally understand what solitude gave you. Solitude did not exile you from the world. It handed you the blueprint to reconfigure it. You became the architect of your timing, your movement, your war, no longer bound by their rhythms, no longer anchored by their expectations. And if these words strike you like a truth you've always felt but never spoken, then you know. This was never about being alone. It was about wielding solitude like a sword. You've already chosen your path. There is no turning back. Burn the scripts they wrote for you. Reject the applause meant to sedate you. Abandon the battlefield built for performance. Operate from your command center. Move in silence. Sharpen your weapons. Let them think you are dormant. Let them believe you've disappeared. Because when you rise, they will not be ready. And by then, it will already be too late.